Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome back to Characters Explained, a series where I cover characters from the game Battle for Neighborville, to ultimately decide if they're worth trying or not. And in today's video, we have the winner from last week's poll, that being Space Cadet. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So Space Cadet's background is relatively small, as she's actually a completely original character made for this game. There is one minor connection to a character from PVZ Heroes, but that's really about it for her. So without much else to say about her background, let's move on to her basic stats. Space Cadet is in a defensive lineup for zombies, so she's a fairly defensive character. And because this character has two forms, we'll cover both the same way I'd cover a character normally. So with that in mind, her base form has 125 HP, and her primary, the Cosmo Shot, deals 6.5 damage normally with 7.8 as a crit. To add to that, her ammo count is 42 with an RPM of 400. So for her base form, she's looking pretty good. But before we move on to Space Cadet's abilities, let's real quick go over two of her gimmicks. The first one is that both Space Cadet and Space Station can double jump, and if you hold the jump button down, you can float to stay in the air just a little bit longer. As for the second gimmick, this one applies to just Space Cadet, and it's that she has homing. Similar to Rose, her shots can track people, and while it isn't so good for Rose, it's definitely better for Space Cadet, as her bullet travel time is much quicker. So with that out of the way, let's go over her abilities. Let's start out with Gravity Smash. This ability flips Space Cadet's vehicle into the air, and after a couple of seconds, she's sent flying down at whatever's underneath her. This ability gives an outline as to where you'll hit the ground, which is visible to plants as well. On impact, this ability deals 125 damage, so overall it isn't too bad. Next up is Station Inflation, which turns you into Space Station. We'll cover that one in a bit, but for now, let's move on to the final ability for Space Cadet, Big Bang Boom. This ability changes Space Cadet's primary into a laser temporarily, with it having to charge up for a second before unleashing a high damage attack on whatever is in front of her. If you hit someone normally, you deal 83 damage, but if you hit a crit, it'll deal 100 damage, which is more than enough to vanquish sunflowers and hardened acorns. It's overall pretty good, and it's definitely a lot of fun to use. So now let's move on to Space Station, as it's kind of its own beast. Its starting health is 275, with it getting 125 health each time another Space Cadet joins you. Oh, I probably should have mentioned that before. This ability allows other Space Cadets to fuse into the space station. We'll get to that later, but for now, let's move on to its damage. Its primary is a 3-round burst laser, which deals 9.9 damage normally with 11.88 as a crit. And this is just for one shot, by the way. So yeah, this thing is pretty good. It has 51 ammo, and its RPM is a nice 473. Overall, it's a very strong primary, but for the compensations you make, it's honestly a good trade-off. I mean, it's not like you could sprint at Space Station. Like Space Cadet, Space Station also has 3 abilities, and we'll start out with Space Force. This ability makes Space Station's primary weapon and movement speed faster for a few seconds, while also reducing the cooldown time for its abilities. This also applies to any Space Cadets that are linked to the Space Station. There's really not much else to say here, it just makes Space Station faster. Next up is Escape Pod, which just reverts Space Station back to Space Cadet. The only thing to talk about here is that if you activate this ability with a loaded Space Station, control of the station is given to another Space Cadet who tagged along with you. And finally, we have Crater Maker. This ability is like Gravity Smash, only it's longer and it's a beam. Basically, when this ability is activated, Space Station flips to a position where the laser is facing the ground. When this is achieved, it begins shooting a massive laser that deals 5 damage rapidly, which can vanquish just about every plant in a matter of a few seconds. It's a very good ability, so it's not surprising to me that people tend to use it a lot. Now, before we move on to the upgrade section, there is one more thing we need to account for here, and that's the Space Cadets that tag along in the Space Station. These Space Cadets can actually use their normal primary, and they also have a couple of unique abilities while they're in this state. The first is the Asteroid Shield, which makes a shield that tracks where the Space Cadet's camera is facing. It blocks up to 125 damage, and it's stackable, which means 3 Space Cadets can face the same direction and there won't be any interference with the shields. The other ability is Hands-on Torpedo, and this ability allows Space Cadet to launch a rocket that works very similarly to the fart balloon in Town Center Zombies. This rocket deals 100 impact damage and it deals 50 splash damage, but its hitbox is pretty small, so it's a bit of a struggle to use. It also doesn't have much HP, so good luck with that, I suppose. So after all that, we've done a basic rundown of everything about Space Cadet and Space Station. It's pretty complicated stuff, but overall she's a good character so far. But can her upgrades make her better? Let's find out. So I don't think this is too surprising to anyone, but Space Cadet has a lot of pretty good upgrades, and because of that, we're going to be covering most of them. There's a couple that don't really make a difference one way or the other, and ironically, all 3 of these upgrades are for passenger Space Cadets. If you really want to know what these are, they're titanium plating, rocket fuel, and ammo eater. The only one out of this bunch that makes any even slightly noticeable difference is ammo eater, which just gives all Space Cadets in the space station 10 ammo back when they're blocking damage with the asteroid shield. It's barely noticeable, like we're talking 20 ammo back before the shield breaks. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's actually start discussing her upgrades. We'll start with upgrades to her base weapons, and the first one is Feedback Loop. This upgrade increases Space Cadet's RPM when she repeatedly hits critical shots on an enemy. This effect lasts until you reload, so it's not sticking around for too long, but it's a pretty good one for winning fights quicker. The next upgrade is Efficiency, which increases Space Cadet's reload speed every time she gets a Vanquish, and this can stack up to 3 times. The effect lasts for a few seconds, but like other similar upgrades, the timer resets for each limb. This upgrade is honestly kind of underrated if you ask me. It's a really good one to pair with Feedback Loop. The final base upgrade is Long Shot, which increases the homing range of Space Cadet's primary by 100% when she's ADSing. There's not much more to say about this one, it's just a solid upgrade overall. Now let's move on to her ability upgrades, and we'll start with Space Cadets. The first is Target Acquired, which increases Space Cadet's movement speed by 50% when she's using Gravity Smash. This upgrade is alright, but we'll discuss one soon that works a lot better. The other upgrade is Bullseye, which allows Big Bang Boom's laser to deal some extra damage before firing. It's debatable to a lot of people on how good this upgrade actually is, but if you ask me, it helps quite a bit. If you play your cards right, you could do a lot of harm with this upgrade, so it's a pretty good one. And of course, I just had to save the cheesiest for last, Afterburners and Assimilation. Afterburners make Space Station 50% faster when Crater Maker is active. Now, that alone is a very good upgrade, and it costs the same as Target Acquired, so I'll let you come to your own conclusions there. But it can get better. Assimilation resets the timer of Crater Maker being active every time you get an elimination. So think about what could happen with those 2 upgrades combined, and ooh, it's gonna be a pretty bad time for your enemies. So that's pretty much everything about Space Cadet's upgrades. Now let's quickly discuss some potential build ideas, and we'll start out with my personal build. This build has Efficiency, Feedback Loop, and Long Shot. For me, I don't personally use Space Station a whole lot, so this build primarily focuses on Space Cadet. And I'd say this build is pretty good at that, especially for dealing continuous damage. Next up is a build that I was implying earlier, which is a Space Station build. This build has Assimilation, Afterburners, and health regeneration. If you ever wanted to see your opponents cry, this build is probably going to get that done. Word of advice though, don't use it often, because you're more than likely going to have a target on your back. Finally, we have a bit of a meme build, with titanium plating, rocket fueled, Ammo Eater, and Rough Patch. This build still has a purpose of sorts, but realistically speaking, it's probably not going to be a game changer of any kind. So with pretty much everything about Space Cadet covered, I think it's about time we answer the big question. Is Space Cadet worth trying? Well, I would say yes, absolutely. Space Cadet is a very interesting character for many reasons, and because of that, she has a lot of room to be flexible. She could probably be played as any role in the game, which is honestly pretty impressive for a new character. And overall, I'd recommend that you guys try her at least once. There's something for everybody with this one. And with that, I think I'll end this video here. Thank you so much for watching until the end, I really appreciate it. This video was a bit delayed and I apologize for that, but I think it overall worked out for the better in the end. If you guys are new around here and you like what you see, then drop a like, maybe even subscribe, and I'll be seeing you guys in my next video. Peace.